Sanding, one of those things as woodworkers we probably aren't a big fan of, but we know it's the necessary part of any project. Now, over the years, I've developed some thoughts about sandpaper that I've recently come to find out just aren't true. I reached out to Mike Taylor from Tay Tools a few months ago and asked him if he wanted to start carrying sandpaper. And instead of just going out and getting something that he could get cheaply and sell at a profit, he did the typical Mike from Tay Tools thing, which is he did a comprehensive study to find the best product available. And that's what I love about Mike, is he is a woodworker and he doesn't just sell tools. He sells tools that he uses and loves. And he did one of the most comprehensive studies that I've ever seen on sandpaper. And so I wanted to share those results with you. We did our own tests to verify his results and make sure that we got consistent results. And we learned a lot about sandpaper, and I'm really excited to share that with you. But first, let's talk about sandpaper, how it's made, how it works, different types, and then we'll get into the results of the test. First, we've got some slow-mo footage for you of a sander and how they work and how progressing through the grits goes. So how does a sander work? What you're watching right now is we took a piece of 80 grit over a piece of clear acrylic and just went across at about 1 inch per second, which is typically what I recommend for sanding speed. Now, as you can see, a random orbital is really not that random. And this really highlights the importance of using the pencil trick where you put pencil on a surface and sand it off, as well as sort of moving your sander and overlapping. Now, what you can see here in this clip is we took the 80 grit and didn't move it. Now, what happens? There's a section that is missing, and that is from the holes in the dust collection for your sander. Obviously, it's very easily solved by moving around, but it's just proof that a random orbital sander is not going to cover the complete distance without some effort from you. And now here what we're doing is we are overlapping grits like you would progress grits as you're sanding a project. Now, as you can see here, as the 120 goes over the 80, it gets rid of the previous scratch patterns. You can tell that the swirls and marks are much smaller. And then again, this is 150 overlapping the 120. The pigtails are again much smaller and gets rid of the marks from the 120. So what types of sandpaper are common to woodworking? We're not going to talk about other types. We're going to talk about the ones most common to woodworking. First, we need to define a term. That term is friability. Friability refers to what happens when that material is used and abused. Does it break apart, creating a new sharp edge that allows the life of the sandpaper to extend, or does it just dull and start to diminish its capabilities? The three most common types of sandpaper are aluminum oxide, garnet, and ceramic. Now, garnet is a very soft natural material. It's not typically used in hook and loop, and it's more in just fine finish hand sanding that garnet is used because it dulls very, very quickly and is also very inexpensive. Aluminum oxide is the most common one that you find in big box stores. It ranges from cheap to very expensive, and the friability goes along with those prices. Cheap doesn't have any friability. The more expensive it is, it has much, much more friability, and that's what aluminum oxide is known for. Now, ceramic is a new material that has only been introduced in the last few years. It's what you find in high-end sandpapers, Festool, Mirka, Norton, and it typically doesn't have good friability. There is one very new one that was just released, the 3M Cubitron, which we'll talk more about in our test, that does have a blend that has a lot of friability. There's a term called open coat or closed coat. Now, open coat means the grain is not touching. Closed coat means that it's all packed in together. Closed coat is much more typical of very high grit sanding, like automotive, metalworking, that kind of thing. So it's not something you really need to worry about. And each manufacturer kind of has a, somewhere between completely open and completely closed. They're in there somewhere, not a big deal. So how is sandpaper made? This was kind of cool and new to me. What they do is they take the material, whether it's the natural garnet or the aluminum oxide, the ceramic, and they heat it up and melt it all together. And then as it's drying, they smash it to bits and run it through screens that are sort of like a coin sorter. It keeps the biggest particles at top and continues to sift through them, and that's how they separate the grits. Now they apply an adhesive to either a paper or film backing, and then they electrostatically attach the grit to it. And I think during that process, it heats up, curing the glue, which then creates these giant rolls of sandpaper that then they cut into circles or squares or belts and that kind of thing. So what makes sandpaper valuable to a woodworker? Well, it's availability, price, removal rate, and the best is going to be a low cost to a high removal rate, right? For example, on my Tormek T8, you can buy this diamond wheel that never dulls and never deteriorates like the grinding wheel does over time. It's $330, but That has very, very high value if you're a professional sharpener because you never have to buy a new one. Whereas the grinding discs that I use, are gonna last me years and years, so I don't feel the need to pay $330 for it. In fact, if you see in this video here, this is how friability works, and this is something that we want. We want it to fracture and continue to last a long time. So when you look at different sandpapers, you need to find a way to test this. How long does it last? How much does it cost? Well, like we were talking about before, Mike Taylor developed this test and we replicated his results, and this is how we did it. So what Mike did was, and in this test will be linked down below, there'll be a link to the full test if you want to read it. It's really comprehensive and I suggest you do. It's really, really cool. He took a sander, he had a Mirka sander, and he put a weight on top of it. He had a lead weight. We used rocks. We both used about a 9-pound weight, set our sander on full RPM, and Mike sanded for 5-minute intervals up to 25 minutes, which I will tell you, I did this yesterday. It's the most boring thing I've ever done, and I had motion sickness till I went to bed. So if you want to duplicate these, knock yourself out, but I promise we put our bodies at risk for you guys to find out some really cool information. I used cherry, which is a 950 on the Janka hardness scale, and he used ash. Now, in mine, the results kind of were equally a little bit less because I use softer wood, which isn't going to tax the sandpaper as much, but we basically got about the same results, and Mike's had a harder wood, which really, after 25 minutes, really gave some good results on the sandpaper. Now, in our test, we did a little bit different. The point of our test was to verify Mike's results, and we wanted to prove those in our shop to make sure there were no variables that we didn't have control over. Now, what we did, we actually timed this with 2 really cool watches. Grand Seiko Snowflake, which is the most accurate automatic watch ever made. It's a spring drive, completely silent watch, and an Omega Speedmaster 57, which was Speedmaster was the first watch on the moon. Why is this important? Because we are starting a horology, gentlemen, it's a technical term, channel on YouTube. If you want to subscribe to that before I launch any videos, that'll be down below. It's going to be a channel all on watches, which has been a hobby and passion of mine for about 20 years. I've been a collector. So I'm really excited to share some of my collection with you guys and do some really cool knowledge dump videos like we do for woodworking. If you're into watches, please subscribe. So we did a 5-minute interval and a 15-minute interval. So I didn't stop every 5 minutes, but we weighed the wood before and after and recorded our results. And they were very much in line with Mike's. Like I said, there were a couple that got a little bit closer because we used way softer wood, but Mike's test was so comprehensive with a harder wood, it really tells a story. So let's go over those results. So Mike tested 12 of the most popular brands. He called those companies and asked what their best offering was. He brought that in and tested those, like I said before, in 5-minute intervals. We did 7 brands. I felt that Mike did his so comprehensive that we could verify the results with that sample size. And let me tell you, some of these companies should be embarrassed, especially Bosch, Makita, and DeWalt, the ones that are mostly in the big brand stores. They're some of the biggest pieces of garbage I've ever seen. Now, when you look at the 5-minute removal rate, it tells a pretty impressive story. The 3M Cubitron far exceeded everything. I mean, it's like I said, it's a new offering that they have, and both Mike and my tests, which are linked down below, 3M Cubitron blew it out of the water. That is this one here, and the one that Tay-Tools has started to carry. It'll be linked down below. Behind the Cubitron was the Mirka. After 5 minutes of stock removal on the ash, the 3M removed almost 25 grams of material, followed by Mirka at about 14 grams. And then on the bottom end of that, Bosch only removed 4, Makita 5, and DeWalt 6 grams. So you can see what a big difference that is. Now, when you look at the cost per disc of those, and this goes to talk, this is like the Tormek example of value. The cost of those are 50, 60 cents a disc. So on paper, pun intended, they look way, way cheaper. When you look at some of the more expensive discs like the Mirka and the 3M, those are $1 per disc. And when it removes 5 times the material, then you look at the value of cost per grams removed. The Makita is 37 cents per gram removed, the Bosch 20 cents, the DeWalt 34 cents, whereas like the Mirka is 6 cents per gram removed and the Cubitron is 4 cents per gram removed. So it makes a massive, massive difference in value. If I only have to buy 1 pack of Cubitron to 20 packs of Bosch or DeWalt, I mean, it's like, that's a no-brainer to me. When you look at these in the 25-minute intervals, you can see this is where the value really shows itself. When you look at the 3M, after in the 5th 5-minute interval that Mike did, it removed 14.52 grams, so a loss of 39% efficiency. Whereas you look at these cheaper brands, and like the Bosch removed 0.91 grams in the final 5 minutes at a loss of 77%. DeWalt 1.36, lost 76%. The Makita 75% loss, it only removed 1.36 grams. And those were very much the same in our test. When we looked at the 15-minute interval, so a total of 20 minutes running, we got very similar numbers. In fact, the Makita only removed 5 grams of the softer wood. DeWalt and Bosch weren't far behind, and now these were measured over a 15-minute period, but very much the same as Mike's tests. When you look at cost per gram removed, this is where this test really shows the value of these sandpapers. Now the bottom players, DeWalt, Makita, and Bosch, the big time loser, Makita at $1.16 per gram, DeWalt $1.04, and Bosch at 60 cents per gram removed. Now when we look at the guys on the high end of the spectrum, the 3M Cubitron is only 5.4 cents, Mirka 7.2 cents, Freud at 20 cents. So you can see that this makes a big difference, and that when you look at the retail cost of something, it's not that big a deal. Now, like I was saying, Mike, always trying to carry the best stuff in his store, has picked up the Cubitron, and because he's a new vendor, he was able to get 3M to give him some sample packs. So if you want to try this before you start buying packs of them, you can do that. He's allowing every person to buy one at $7.50. It comes in a pack of 15. It has the sample grits in it, so you can get that. Highly recommend it, super cool. He also picked up some really cool other products that I really like. You can make your own sanding block. He has these peel and stick PSA. That reminds me, when you're buying these, make sure there's 2 types of sandpaper. There's PSA, which has a sticky back and has no holes in it. And then there is the hook and loop, and that's like the one you see here that has the holes, which are great, by the way. So easy to line up. It doesn't matter. They're everywhere. And originally, I thought that's why the mesh ones were so good. Oh, they don't clog. They've got holes everywhere. You don't have to line them up. Doesn't make a difference. We got the same dust collection with every single one in this test. There wasn't one that like let dust out or didn't, but I digress. You can get these peel and stick circles, which are really cool. You can do this with it and create like a sanding pad or a block. That's really cool. These are really useful. I have tons of these in my shop. This is what I put under my projects, because obviously when you're sanding, you want to protect the surface. I would just be careful and not finish on these, because you know, oils have a tendency not to dry on this material. So when you put your next project on it, sometimes you'll get spots. Just a little tip for you. He's got the Cubitron sheets too. So if you want to do hand sanding, those are really good. He's out of stock on these guys, but he should have those back in. But like I said, you can buy 5 or 6 inch of the sticky Velcro pads and make your own, which is kind of a fun project anyway. Everything that we talked about in this video is linked below. The tests are linked below. And I just want to say thank you to Mike from Tay-Tools, because this really answered a lot of questions I had and taught me some things I didn't know. So I'm really excited about this. I'm really excited to be using this Cubitron, because it just makes such a difference. And I hate sanding, especially after doing this test. My goodness. The motion sickness we had after 6 hours of sanding was not I had. Mark was just bored running the camera, but came out great, and it was really incredible. So like I said, everything's linked down below. If you want to support the channel, head over to the Katz-Moses store, pick up one of my new aprons, which are going to be in stock shortly. And so we're going to end that pre-sale and giveaway. Dovetail jig or a stop block. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay safe in the shop. Have a wonderful day.